Hi, Gary Stearman in the Prophecy Watcher studio with Avi Lipkin to continue the discussion that we've been having concerning things that are happening in the Middle East. Very confusing events, one after another, almost faster than you can follow them. But today, Avi, I want to talk to you about something maybe bigger than the Middle East. Let's talk about the global picture. You can sort of look at the Middle East right now and get lost because you've got so many players and they have so many motivations, and there are large players, small players, there are quiet players like the Saudis sitting down here and saying nothing at all. But overall, and you and I have had this conversation off camera, there's sort of a larger game plan that transcends all of these wars and rumors of wars in the Middle East. Let's talk about that.
Okay, well, firstly, as you see here on the table, I have 7 books. My very first book has a testimony, and I repeat the testimony in my most recent book too as well. It's called the Dallas Council on World Affairs. Mm-hmm. And this was my #1 testimony in all my life. And it talks about an experience I had in Dallas, Texas in April of '91, where I was told that the only thing that made America great was the barrel of oil. Steady price of oil, steady supply of oil, and that the one world government, they said it to me, we will not allow Israel and the Jews to come in the way of our oil supplies. Now, what I've seen is that World War II, 6 million Jews died, mm-hmm. and the Jews did not come in the way of the oil supplies because it was the Saudis at that time who were in charge of the oil supplies as well in the 1930s and 40s. Millions of people have been slaughtered in Africa, but that's okay because if the Muslims are doing the killing, that's just fine. Christians are being annihilated now in the Middle East. It's a Holocaust against Christianity. It is the erasing of Christianity after 2,000 years in the Middle East. That's okay too, because if the Muslims are doing the ethnic cleansing and the massacres and the Holocaust of the Christians, that's okay, because you have to have this Sunni Muslim oil, cash, and numbers of immigrants coming to Europe and America to keep the world economy functioning the way the one world economists like. And my Christian friends who were with me that night in April '91 said, no, what made America great is not the barrel of oil. What made America great was Jesus Christ. So that was very enlightening for me. The lights went on that night. But the problem is that America today is not a Christian country anymore. America today is a mammon country. Washington is a mammon town. Europe is a mammon continent. And so if
mammon, of course, money.
Yeah, if you take out the money, then if you take out God, then your new God becomes mammon. You serve the Lord or you serve mammon or money. So what's happening today is very simply, if you've taken God out of the equation, if you've taken Judaism, Christianity out of the equation, which is what these people are doing, this one world government, the only thing that matters is money. Religion is just a nuisance, according to these people. God, you want to get rid of the hatred and get rid of God, which is basically the communist ideology, but they're applying it in a capitalist way. Because if you're a Christian, you cannot really work with the Muslims and be a true Christian. You cannot be a true Jew and work with the Muslims because the Muslims want to destroy you. But if you get rid of God, that's the perfect solution. And so it's now mammon, money is the God.
What you're talking about is now arising under a sort of a new name. We were hearing a new term, crony capitalism.
Right.
In which capitalism works in a behind-the-scenes way with government power, administrative power in high places. It's not classic communism, but it works the same way. Money talks.
Right. Okay, so what is happening, and I think I've mentioned this in past shows, America is going through an osteoporosis industrially. America is losing its industries to countries where they pay $60 salary a month, $30 salary a month. Capitalists, with all due respect to the unions, I mean, the unions in the United States have given the American worker nice salaries, but it's basically priced American industry out of the market. So the capitalists flee from these high salary prices. And so American industry has disappeared. What does this do to America? It forces America to be more dependent, for example, on internet, services, tourism, and which means you are more and more dependent on Islamic cash. After you've paid them for the oil, you want that money reinvested back into the United States. Now, the Islamic countries don't have industry. If you're a Muslim leader and you have trillions of dollars that you've made from the oil, you can't leave it under your bed. You've got to reinvest it into some system that'll make you money. And also, you sublimate that money to the glory of Allah. In other words, if you take that money and you invest it into Wall Street, Wall Street was, at the end of 2008, Wall Street was down at 6,000. And all of a sudden it goes back to 12,000 within 2-3 months. Now it's inching up to 18,000. And I predict that Wall Street will go up to 25,000 very soon, because if you have millions of Muslims pouring into the US, or you're going to have to build houses for these people. The greatest motor of GDP, the greatest motor of any economy, is housing. And so if you're going to build houses for millions of people, American economy is going to be stronger than ever.
And this is in the news as we speak.
This is not in the news.
Housing, well, it's in the news.
Oh, I mean, yes.
Housing in Europe, I've seen a couple of articles in the last 3 or 4 days on the housing shortage in Europe. Some people are saying that we could have a housing shortage in the United States.
For sure.
And so you're saying that through the eyes of the man you're talking about, this is a good thing. And we also see an encouraging move from Russian, now that is from European leaders, who are saying, come on, settle in our country, we love you, we want you here. And we're beginning to see the same thing, of course, in the United States. And what's going on here?
Yes, because the moment you've taken God out of the equation, the moment you've taken Christianity out of the equation, or Judeo-Christian Western civilization and democracy, then what are you left with? You're left only with economics. And if you're talking about straightforward economics, then it's all about money and it's all about population transfer.
You have just said it all. You take away the spiritual life of a nation, the Judeo-Christian tradition, Western civilization, and what's left? Money.
You know, I want to tell you something. I spend most of my time in Texas, Oklahoma, and usually I come up on 35 between Texas and Oklahoma. But sometimes I take 75 and I go up to eastern Oklahoma and then over to Missouri or to Arkansas. And that's some of the most beautiful countryside in the United States. You've got beautiful sweetwater lakes.
Yes.
You've got rolling hills with wonderful forests, lots of trees with which to build houses. You have water. The land is empty. And I drive up from Texas. Until I reach McAllister, there's virtually just nothing, it's just a few small towns. You can easily fit 20, 30 million Muslims there. You go to the Ozarks. Ozarks also, beautiful rolling hills and lakes, and empty. You can put 20, 30 million Muslims there too. Think for a moment, 50 to 100 million Muslims coming to America. You're going to have such an unprecedented building boom, which leads to an unprecedented economic boom.
So you're explaining to me why we have an open borders policy.
Yes.
And why there's such a battle over closing the southern border, the northern border.
And also the reason you will never have a fence along the border with Mexico is because you're going to unite with Mexico. Mexico, United States, Canada will be formed as a new nation, part of the NAFTA agreement, because the Europeans are now 350 million. The Americans are about 310, 320 million. So for America to outweigh the Europeans as population, if you merge with Mexico and Canada, then the combined populations of Mexico, Canada, US is 500 million people. Europeans 350 million. So what are the Europeans going to do? They're going to bring Turkey in. But Turkey is not only 70 million Turks, but it's 200 million former Soviet Turkic peoples. And what's going to happen is you will go overnight. Europe will be 620 million people, of which 320 million are Muslim. And that means Turkey becomes a Muslim continent overnight. But that's okay, because you've taken God out of the equation.
The big picture here is very interesting. As you talk, I'm thinking of Daniel in the Bible and Revelation in the Bible, which talks about a consortium of powers in the latter days. And they are called the 10 kings. The 10 horns of power that rise up in the last days. And I've said for the last 20, 30 years that these are administrative regions. In other
Right.
words, the earth is divided up into 10 administrative regions at some point. And as you speak, in my mind is going back through Scripture and through Daniel and Revelation, as it talks about the rise of this latter-day government, which is a global government, the government of the Antichrist. And what you're saying now, in very diffuse terms, is the beginning outlines of that global government. In other words, we're now beginning, I think we're getting to the point where we can begin to see it at last. We've looked for it. You're describing it. You're talking about the massive relocation of population for economic reasons. This is an amazing thought.
Yes. I think, for example, that if NAFTA, Mexico, Canada, US is $500 million, but don't forget, if you bring in Brazil, I think is I don't remember if it's 150 million or 200 million. You bring in Argentina, which I think is 30, 40 million. If you take all the countries of Latin America and bring them into NAFTA, you're close to 1 billion people in the Western Hemisphere. Okay, Europe with the Turks gets up to 620 million people. So that's the second group. China, 1.5 billion people. Russia is a small group, 150 million people. India, 1 billion people. Right there you have 5 horns. Africa, I don't know how we divide up Africa, but Africa could be another horn. Australia, another. Japan, another.
Yes.
It's very, I don't want to say it's very easy. You have to stretch the mind a little to get to the 10 horns. But yes, I do believe that what we're going to be seeing is the major competition will be between Western Hemisphere, Europe, China,
Yeah.
and India.
And the Bible predicts, that is the prophet Daniel, and of course John writing in Revelation, talk about internecine warfare between these 10 leadership groups, and one rises dominant, and he becomes the man known as the Antichrist. He's called the little horn at first. He rises up and he speaks great things, but in the end he becomes the most powerful of them all. And I think we can almost begin to see this happening right now.
Yes, I believe so. And I'll say one more thing. ISIS has said among its other goals, it has 2 goals that I wanted to focus on. One is that, you know, they're blowing up the ancient holy sites of pagan religions.
Yes.
So, for example, Palmyra in Syria, or Bamiyan, in where this giant statue of Buddha
Yes.
in Afghanistan was blown up. Afghanistan originally was a Buddhist country, then it became Islamicized. India, Pakistan is basically India, but Indian peoples that were forced to convert to Islam. So you have this Islamic thrust to blow up anything that is not Islamic. In Egypt, the pharaonic sites, anything that's pre-Islamic has to be destroyed. Now, here comes the ironic part. In my book number 6, I talk about the Black Stone in Mecca. Okay?
Yes.
Now, the Black Stone in Mecca, I believe Moses and Aaron and Jethro were there. Okay? Medina, you have Mecca and Medina, the holy cities of Islam. Medina is Midian. And one of the names of Midian is Jethro. Medina, Midian, Jethro. Jethro in Arabic is Yathrib. Yathrib is Jethro, is Midian, Medina. So what they're saying is this black stone existed during the time of Moses, it has to be blown up because it's pre-Islamic. Okay? Now, what does that mean? It means if you blow up the holiest site in Islam, you're cutting the head off of the serpent. ISIS is going to cause Islam to commit suicide. But that's a religious thing. Economically, ISIS is saying they're going to blow up the oil wells. If you blow up the oil wells, within 2 weeks, Europe has no oil. They can't produce plastic. China cannot produce plastic. India cannot produce plastic if the Straits of Hormuz are blocked or if the oil wells get blown up by ISIS. So the one world government says, no way, Jose, we're not going to allow ISIS to do that. So I predict that Saudi Arabia and the oil-producing areas will be occupied by the one world government and Islam will be banned because this is a fly in the ointment. The one world government cannot allow ISIS to destroy the world economy.
So in a very powerful way, you can understand what's going on in today's newspapers by thinking big, by looking at the flow of money
Right.
and the flow of population. And there are people trying to relocate populations. They're trying to relocate manufacturing to suit their own desires.
Right.
They're knocking down long-established national borders to do this.
Right.
This really explains what's going on in a remarkable way for me. And it's biblical, because both Daniel and Revelation, and of course a number of the other major an the Old Testament, speak of these days in which we're living, the latter days, as a time when an order of things is going to be organized by Gentile world powers. And those are evil indeed. Every one of the prophets agrees that these people are bad people.
Right.
So there you go. Islamic rivalry gets really to the nub of things in the Middle East right now. Avi's latest book, Islamic Rivalry, yours for 1995 in our online bookstore here at Prophecy Watchers. He's written 6 other books, which we also have in the bookstore. You can get all 7. We call it the Avi Lipkin package for $79.95. That would be about $129 value. Get all 6 of Avi's books and make your way through them. And you'll have a great deal of understanding about what's going on in the world today, as you've just heard. Maybe the light went on a little bit as we've been having this conversation. Anything you'd like to add in closing?
I'm going to say something now, which is a whole program to itself, but I'll say it in just 2 or 3 sentences. When ISIS carries out these attacks, blows up the Blackstone, blows up the oil wells, and then Iran, Shiites attack Saudi, which is Sunni, Egypt comes to the defense of Saudi and attacks Iran. When that happens, Iran blows up the Aswan Dam. Iran said they would do it. So when Iran blows up the Aswan Dam, Egypt is destroyed, and 90 million Egyptians have to seek higher ground to get away from the floodwaters, and then they're going to be starving and thirsting in the desert. They have to come to America. You're going to get 50 million overnight, and Agenda 21 will be adopted by the U.S. government.
Ezekiel 29. You know, when you say that, you know, the hair on the back of my neck stands up, because I have thought for years that Ezekiel 29 is one of the most amazing places in the whole Bible, where Ezekiel talks about the Nile River and a curse that will occur upon the Nile River. And the center of the curse is called the Tower of Syene. This is Ezekiel 29:10, if you want to read about it. And the Tower of Syene is the Aswan High Dam.
Yes.
Which didn't exist when Ezekiel wrote this prophecy, by the way.
Very correct.
Most fascinating. And I wish we had time to just go on and freewheel for a while, but I think you've probably heard enough to understand that we are living in crucial, crucial days. Pray for Israel. Pray for Avi's family, his friends, the people in Israel who are, if you will, holding down the fort, because they are in a key location. In fact, it happens to be the location of all the locations on planet Earth. The Lord loveth the gates of Zion more than all the dwelling places of Jacob, it says in the Psalms, and I believe that's true.
If I may have just another moment, and it's a very important point to stress, when I was an Israeli army spokesman, we had peace with Egypt, we had peace with Jordan, we were negotiating with Arafat, which really is a farce, but the point is, the only real enemy militarily that Israel faced was Syria. Where is Syria today? God has neutralized Syria.
Wow.
God has neutralized Iraq. These countries are depopulating now, and the populations are being transferred to the West. When they come to the West, they're going to kill the Jews and the Christians married to the Jews, and those Christians that support Israel. And we're going to see a flood of Jews and Christians moving to the Middle East, to an Israel that's going to have expanded borders, because when ISIS attacks Jordan, Israel expands. It could be Lebanon, it could be Syria, it could be Jordan, it could be Saudi. So we're talking about a messianic era that's rapidly approaching. New borders, new populations.
That sounds like your next book.
I covered in the Islamic Rivalry book.
Okay. It's always a pleasure talking with Avi Lipkin, and who knows what's going to happen next. But it's going to be exciting. It's going to be described in the Bible, in the prophets. So keep reading, keep studying, and by the way, keep watching. We are. Thanks for joining us on Prophecy Watchers. You can find us on the web at prophecywatchers.com, where you can sign up for our free email newsletter, or follow us at facebook.com/prophecywatchers. In the meantime, keep watching, everybody, and we'll see you soon.